Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and Saturday morning, which is very sunny in Levenshulme, with a very tired cat and me still in my pyjamas. It feels like the last weekend of summer, which is nice. We've got a last blast of sunlight and sunshine, and we're going to have people over for the afternoon. Quite a late night last night down the pub with Jeremy DJing. My voice is rough because I sat with the smokers outside, almost in defiance of all of the Labour Party's stuff about smoking outside pubs this week. Foolishness of trying to make people behave and chivvy people into good behaviour. Just get on with the job of government and stop telling people what to do, I think. And giving horrible parties the chance to come on and take over their news coverage, which they did, by introducing silly ideas. People should be allowed to smoke where they want. Anyway, I gave up smoking 20 years ago, and I was so glad that I did. And I do feel rough this morning, my voice, which you can probably hear. You can't see me because I'm focusing on the cat. Here he is. Hello, Socks. You going to say hello? He just wants to cuddle in. You're facing away from the camera. I thought what I'd do before I go out and buy snacks for and wine for the afternoon and our guests is a little bit of a book haul while I'm having my coffee. Jeremy's fixed the espresso machine in the kitchen, and so we're having little tiny coffees like that. And they're gorgeous, aren't they, Socks? Socks isn't having any more coffee. He used to lick a few drops off my fingers, but somebody said that caffeine was very bad for cats. So we're not having that anymore, are we, Socks? Oh, he's going to face the camera for once. So, a book haul from this week, which I've not really done, and I have picked up a few books, a few interesting books, in the past few days. In fact, I've just seen one that my that my camera's leaning against, which is a bit annoying. I will move that and this and try not to dislodge it. Yes. And the first thing, about a week ago, we went to New Mills, a little town in a valley south of here, with a few charity shops. And I got this Reader's Digest book of The Unexplained from 1981. And it's just fantastic. The Reader's Digest always did, in this era, wonderful books, really beautifully illustrated, researched and written. Whether they were about folklore or villages you must visit or mysteries. This, I would even say, it's at least as good as Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, that classic of the same era that I treasured and still have 2 copies of on my shelf. This might even have the edge on it. They were such lavish books. Anyway, as you might know, I love anything to do with the unexplained and mysteries. I always have. This covers all the bases. There's some very funny bits, kind of bits that aren't meant to be funny, but there's an earnestness about the Reader's Digest tone, I guess. Anyway, anything about cryptids and Bigfoot, big feet, and psychic pets and ghosts has my my vote. I should do a video at some point about the top 10 mysteries books I've ever read, or maybe the top 10 mysteries. Maybe I should just make this a mystery channel, make it all about solving mysteries, like the X-Files. Maybe not. Right, what else? So yesterday, when our friends Deborah and Richard visited, we went all around Levenshulme, up and down the high street, Friday afternoon, and went out for tea at our favourite Syrian restaurant, Sips and Dips, and had an amazing feast in the sun. And before that, we went to Bobcat Books, our local bookshop on the High Street in the Antiques Village, which I've talked to Susie and Ian there, and I'm going to visit there on camera and do a bookshop visit at some point soon and talk to them about their bookshop. It's a really lovely shop, really well chosen, secondhand and new. And I bought a pile of things yesterday, including this, 100 children's books that inspire our world by Colin Salter, which is chronological and full of essays about classic kids books. And I've read, I think, just about everything in this, which I was amazed to find out, and disappointed as well, because you think, well, what do I read now? It's really beautifully illustrated. Each time they've picked the best cover of the best edition of each book, like that of the Phantom Tollbooth with the Edward Gorey illustration. I haven't really dipped into what the essays are like yet. I hope they're good. It was kind of irresistible. There's Barbar. I bought a whole pile of vintage Barbar books in Darlington when we were last there, and but there's the copy of Wind in the Willows I got at about 10. Properly recognised as the best edition there's ever been, I think. It's up there because it just reproduces Shepard's drawings so well. Anyway, this is, look at that cover for the Wolves of Willoughby Chase. That looks like Gorey as well. I'm not sure if it is. So there was that. And then, well, in keeping with the theme of some of my reading lately of fairy tales, this combination of Michael Foreman and Angela Carter is delightful. Now, I don't think I've got this. I think this is a book my sister had that I bought for her in the early 90s. I think that's right. Because the illustrations are really familiar. I mean, Foreman's world is familiar anyway. His slightly damp and soggy watercolory world. And as I've said before, I've collected quite a lot of his books. His The Wizard of Oz and Alice and Peter Pan and his world fairy tales, his Christmas stories, his own books, including the one about the flying bus at Christmas. And this, I think, was something that I read to my sister when she was little, because I really remember the Beauty and the Beast that Foreman drew, which is quite different. Usually he's a lion or he's something hairy. Here he's some kind of Lovecraftian fish person or a kind of octopus in doublet and hose, or a reptile, which is an interesting and good take on the character. So gloomy, the illustrations. Anyway, I thought a bit more Angela Carter wouldn't come amiss at the moment. At some point I'll tell you what all this fairy tale reading is about and why, but I can't yet. Now, something else. Oops, they're out of order. I also got this, Julia and the Shark, a book I read about and didn't read. It came out during lockdown, I think. Kieran Millwood Hargrave. It's a beautifully designed book with pages that are occasionally transparent, laying maps over each other and illustrations that work cleverly. So you're looking through opaque pages. I've never seen that before, I don't think. And hopefully it all means something. Yep, and it seems really nicely written. About a little girl in a lighthouse and this shark. And then, I think I talked about this. This arrived. I treated myself to the new Rainbow Roll in hardback. and James Lovegrove, who is someone I know through Facebook. He's a wonderful writer, and I met him at a conference once, convention, and he's done one of these Titan tie-ins with the Marvel Universe, retelling the original Doctor Strange stories by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. In fact, my volume is wedged in the middle of the shelves there of the actual comic strips. But the idea of a kind of modern novelistic retelling of those that is parallel to but different to the movies. I find the movies enjoyable, but they're too jokey. I find Benedict Cumberbatch's take on it jokey and lacking the kind of scratchiness of the Stan Lee Steve Ditko version. So hopefully this has got a bit of that. I thought it would just be interesting to check out what's happening with these Marvel adaptations. Of course, we've already got the Lisa Jewell book down there that came out recently. So at some point I'm going to have a Marvel time. Right, there was that. Oh, and then the charity shop in New Mills again. Bob Mortimer's novel. Now, you know that I think celebrity authors suck. I just do, and I think they've ruined publishing, and publishing has allowed them to ruin publishing, and publishing has ruined itself. That's what I think. There are certain writers I'll give a free pass to, authors who are celebrities. So obviously, back in the day, David Niven and his memoirs about Hollywood are wonderful books. I was raving about them yesterday to somebody who'd never read them, who had no interest in them. The thing about Niven's books about Hollywood is it lets you into a world in a way that nobody else could, and he writes so well. And in more recent years, Paul O'Grady's books about his career are blissful. And a couple of years ago, Bob Mortimer's memoir was really enjoyable. And so I'm happy to try out his first novel and see how it is. Pages are bent. But apart from that, and Richard E. Grant, most celebrity authors can go and bugger off, really, and leave writing to writers. I'll never forget how rude one particular comedian author was to a friend of mine on Facebook. Yeah. The kind of entitlement that people in the public eye have, that they can do anything and turn a decent profit from it, is despicable, really. He was so rude to a writer friend of mine, saying that essentially his popularity was down to his talent as a writer and not any celebrity that he'd gained from being on TV, and was judging my friend, who was terribly ill at the time, unfavourably in the light of his own brilliance. Dreadful. Also, I got a recent-ish Jeanette Winterson novel. Now, I've not read Jeanette Winterson for a while, since I read her take on, I think, A Winter's Tale, part of that Shakespearean series. I think it was A Winter's Tale, and I thought it was awful. The Gap of Time. That's right. I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 of her books. That's quite a comprehensive list here. There's actually a couple of things I don't know, which surprises me. But I've read an awful lot of her books, and I stayed with her all the way through the 90s. Are you off socks? And I think, I've said this before about other people, I think if people have smoke blown up their arse for decades, they end up coughing. It's like a Zen parable. I think if people are praised endlessly and they can't do wrong, and Jeanette was kind of in that position, I think, in the 90s, or rather what she told herself, the hype around her was like that. I think she attracted criticism for her perceived arrogance, but she lived in a fog of her own self-assurance and talent, undoubted talent. But she became a bit finger-waggy, a bit like the Labour Party telling you can't smoke outside. And a bit lectury and a bit evangelical about herself, dare I say. And so I went off her in the end. By the early 2000s, I felt preached at. She'd lost the kind of comic zest of the earlier books. Anyway, this is her book, Frankenstein, her take on Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, which came out in 2019. I mean, I feel weirdly possessive, and of course I can't. I don't own anything, but weirdly possessive over Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, and certainly The Bride of Frankenstein since doing my Brenda books. So maybe that's why I didn't read this. But listen to this blurb. I don't know if I like it or not. I don't know if it's ridiculous or not. In Brexit Britain, a young transgender doctor called Rye is falling in love against their better judgment with Victor Stein, a celebrated professor leading the public debate around AI. She's kind of cramming as many issues as she possibly can. We've got Brexit, AI, trans issues, love, her kind of the beloved and the lover. Meanwhile, Ron Lord, just divorced and living with mum again, is set to make his fortune launching a new generation of sex dolls for lonely men everywhere. Toxic masculinity, then, it'll be. Across the Atlantic, and teledildonics, as she called kind of technological fake sex in one of her earlier novels. Across the Atlantic in Phoenix, Arizona, a cryonics facility houses dozens of bodies of men and women who are medically and legally dead but waiting to return to life. So a bit of science fiction. But the scene is set in 1816. Her time travel stuff, here we go back to a historical bit, with a feminist author. When 19-year-old Mary Shelley writes a story about creating a non-biological life form, beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful. What will happen when Homo sapiens is no longer the smartest being on the planet? Jeanette Winterson shows us how much closer we are to the future than we realise. That future. Funny and furious, bold and clear-sighted, Frankenstein is a love story about life itself. The blurb is really naff, I have to say. I don't know, it almost reads like a parody of her. But then that's just the trappings, you know, we've got to, we have to sink into the book and see what she's up to. Hopefully. I would love to read a new Jeanette Winterson novel and really enjoy it. So I hope I do. I hope I do, Jeanette. Years ago, I remember when she was getting a hard time for the press because she'd written a book in which there was a gender undeclared narrator, and it was more like one giant poem than a novel, written on the body in about 1994. And she was very bold and holding forth about why she was the kind of reincarnation of Virginia Woolf's Orlando or something. And she did a reading in a tent, a circus tent, filled with mirrors and all sorts, at outside Granada Studios in Manchester. And we went. And I remember sitting on the edge of the stage in the interval and chatting with her about favourite books. She was in such a bad mood with the audience. She didn't feel she was getting received well enough by the audience, although we'd all paid to come and see her in this circus tent, and everyone was delighted to see her. I think she had a bad review in the press. But anyway, I sat on the stage with her and we had a nice chat. And I liked Written on the Body, but I didn't like it as much as the earlier ones. She didn't transport me to a different time and place. I think that's what the other books had done. Hopefully this will take me back to the 18th century. Anyway, that's the pile of stuff I've picked up in the last week. This is me not buying many books, of course, but here they are. The Unexplained, fairy tales, children's books, sharks, Doctor Strange, some celebrities, Frankenstein, Jeanette Winterson, and Rainbow Roll. That's a good haul. Now, I've got to read this, though, in the next week. A book I first read in April 91. I've begun it, and actually it's a bit stiff. It's a bit too Dickensian. You could do with cutting it down a bit, I think. But then I always feel that about John Irving. I will go now, and I'll see you again soon. Maybe after the weekend. Hope everyone's well and enjoying the very last blast of August. Okay. See you again soon. Bye-bye.